Alright, it's time. It's time for me to try an 11 by 17 inch scene, that is. It's tabloid, double page spread type of thing. And I have a piece of paper here, it's cardstock, and the type of paper it is, it's probably, it's 10 point matte, smooth. I believe it's the same on both sides. One side feels a little bit slicker than the other one. I don't know why. I think it's double-sided coated, but I'm not really sure. It's by this paper company called Appleton. It's just, that's not some kind of brand that was recommended to me. I just walked into Kelly Paper, which is this local paper chain. They also sell online and whatnot, but I picked it up because I just like the feel of the surface. Okay, I didn't hear anything about it, nothing in terms of the performance of it or anything like that. Okay, hybrid inks. Okay, hybrid inks are a combination of pigment ink and dye-based inks. Okay, 11 by 17. This is big. Who knows? I might be using up my entire pad for one piece. I don't think so, but I'll be using up quite a bit of ink in here. I want to try to go for this that semi-impressionistic feel to this end result again. So it's going to be this kind of this fall type of foliage type of scene, but it's going to be done in the reflections down here, how Monet with his water lilies and whatnot. It was all about the the water and whatnot. I should look that up right now. As a matter of fact, kind of observe some of those. I don't know, just the color schemes. It's not going to be quite that because I'm not using a brush with little, specks of ink and whatnot, so, and I don't have like a bunch of acrylics. I'm certainly not going to work in like oil paints, this, for a stamping video or even get back into it. I haven't oil painted in, I don't know, whatever, since school, it's like 35 years or something like that. I don't even have them. Actually, I probably still have my oil paints. I seem to have all my supplies from back then, but not too many. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a little swampy land area, and hopefully a lot of reflections in the water. This doesn't look like water. It doesn't look like if I was to look at this right now, I'd have absolutely no idea what I'm going after. But we'll see how this goes here. Okay. I don't know. I think what happens is when I try to go like really super loose and somewhat abstract, in the end I start bringing things back around to kind of something I'm a little bit more kind of comfortable with and familiar with. But I don't know. Hopefully we can add some elements of kind of more of a painterly style into this scene. It might not be so impressionistic, but that's the spirit I want to have in certain areas of this piece. Okay, so dye-based inks work by staining the surface of whatever you're applying the dye-based inks onto. Okay, hybrid pigment inks are more surface-oriented. They stay on the surface of your paper. So there's a little bit of stain, but then there's a lot of buildup too of this ink on the surface. So as I'm applying it, it gets a little bit easier to apply in terms of a smooth transition or application, because as this surface starts to build up that ink, there's less absorption happening, so I can get just kind of a nice, swatch of this color, applied others. Otherwise, it's real toothy. It's the tooth of the paper, the texture of the paper, the grooves of it. Although this is a pretty smooth piece of paper, but there's still a slight bit of tooth to it, like say over like glossy cardstock. So you can kind of see a little bit of texturing going on in there. Hopefully, I don't know if you can in the video here, but there is some texture, albeit very limited. Okay, so I think that's about right there. Okay. I'm going to be going back to this. It's kind of this oscillation. I'll add a color, I'll add more colors, then I'll go back to lighter one, so on and so forth. Okay. All right. So here's where, taking a deep breath here. Some of those kind of more reflective types of qualities come in. Let's say that we have a pond or something like that, and we're underneath a bunch of maple trees or something like that with a lot of color. Okay, I want to capture some of those colors in here. I don't want to go like this, like that. I want to kind of do it in the spirit of this being water, so the striations are kind of going on a horizontal kind of formatting. So kind of this type of thing. I can go back and forth like this. Try to keep it kind of in that that spirit. Okay. Now, I haven't done that before, and I'm not a painter, so so I'm not an authority of most things, but especially not of something like this. So this is just me kind of fumbling around doing this. And if you like kind of the results that we see here, then maybe you can kind of apply it to some pieces that you might do. But you can let me be kind of the guinea pig. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm kind of going like this type of thing, right? And that type of mark is being applied here. Switch this around. Okay, so that. All right, so this, by the way, these are Moonlight Duo pads. They all have the accompanying white in them, thus the duo aspect of the naming convention. It's so you can kind of mix whatever color you're using with white and get some kind of duller, lighter version of that, than using the straight ink, whatever color it happens to be. This one is Solar Flare Orange. The other one was a Sunshine Yellow. Okay, so see that right there? Kind of, a little bit painterly looking. See, like, I want to even some of these out, so I'll go back in with the yellow. I don't want to get too comfortable with these inks, thinking that kind of I can do anything with them. But so far so good on these ones. I feel like we can do, in the back of my mind, I think, I can just do about anything with these inks. And they're kind of forgiving. So let's say I go too dark, then I can lighten it up. If I add too much of a certain color, then I cover it up with some other color. But I don't want to just absolutely take that for granted and kind of go into this kind of foundation here with absolutely no strategy at all. Figuring, oh, okay, I can just compensate for that later because I don't want to create extra work for myself. All right, so just kind of oscillating this, this is we're just about all the way up for this 11 by 17. Okay, Okay. I mean, this is a really big piece of paper, of course, but I don't know, when you're using this like gigantic swatchy, type of applicator like this, it's just, I think this is a whole paper towel that I'm using this time. You can get, some pretty good amount of coverage pretty quickly. It's like using like if you had a rag or something like that, that would be great too. It doesn't have to be a paper towel. You can use an actual, like, cloth rag, I guess. Okay, this is some sort of magenta, Milky Way magenta, okay? Alright, that one looks like how I want it to look. This one doesn't look like it. I want it to look at all, it's like seeing a reflection in a kind of a wavy, kind of a textured, wind rippled pond or something like that, where the textures are being kind of broken up a little bit, in theory. So, see something like that. It's all kind of smudgy and stuff like that. I'll just blend it out with some additional tones. That's what's really nice about these hybrids, especially if you build it up enough where they're kind of, they're sitting on the surface of the paper, and I can really kind of manipulate them after the fact. I can cover them up with, some additional inks. I can cover them up with white pigment ink. I can subdue it. I don't know, that fact that you can kind of manipulate them a lot is, like I said, I need to be careful with that so I don't just take that for granted and kind of just do anything. Because I don't want to have to, if I don't like something that I do, I don't want to have to completely, I'll undo it to an extent, it's good to experiment around and try new things, but I don't want to do everything, though, and get rid of a whole area. I do really long videos, but I don't like having to just eradicate something completely. If I want to be working towards something, as opposed to just kind of, eliminating something that I shouldn't have done. Doesn't mean you should be gun shy and you shouldn't experiment, but I just don't want to have to redo everything in a given area. Okay, so kind of coming around, looking a little weird. The spirit's kind of, the spirit of the piece is kind of building and altering a little bit. So you just kind of break these kind of streaks up a little bit, and that kind of creates that kind of watery, like, those watery like transitions happening a little bit. I don't know. It kind of looks like acrylics or something, maybe. I don't know. If you're an acrylic painter, you're saying no way. I guess it looks more like acrylics or something like that than dye-based inks, though, at least. Relatively, speaking, I guess. I tend to see these pigment inks, too, as sometimes I refer to them as paint because they kind of remind me of paint. Alright, so that is that. Let's see. I do want to... Let's switch out to another color now. Let's bring some greens. Let's say that there's some greenery in the whatever types of trees are around. This area, let's go with, I have 3 different types of green. I'm trying to figure out which ones to go in here. Okay, let's go with, I don't know what color this is. I don't know these colors here, and I kind of forget them instantly after I mention them. Martian green, okay. Kind of a yellow-green tinge, okay. I'll generally try to keep the green within the yellow areas, not going into that pink and red. Okay, but you know, some of it will overlap, and that's, you know, we want some blending to occur like that. You know, some of that cross. I was going to say cross contamination, but I don't know. Hopefully it looks okay. Okay. Something like this. Okay. Martian green. Let's move into, let's go to this one, Space Moss. Okay, a little bit of a darker too. That one's pretty dark. Okay, now I plan on putting like some cattails and reeds up here, kind of oscillating them up. So that's what I'm kind of looking at right now. Let me kind of develop some areas where those might be located. I'll have a bunch of them right here maybe. So I'll create a little bit of a shadow down here for them. Okay, and going up a little bit higher over here just to kind of oscillate things a touch. This will have a bank of them right up here. Actually, I think I know what I'm going to use on this. I think I need my islands. Okay. Kind of creating a little bit of horizon line. If this happens to work out in terms of a technique, this is a really easy way to do it. If it doesn't turn out, then that was a lousy... This is a lousy way to do it. We'll have to see what kind of results. Okay. Ew. Boy, that sure looks splotchy, doesn't it? This is the type of thing where, you know, when I look at something like this, it's like, oh, kind of this little bit of trepidation. Not a lot, though. I mean, you know, what's the worst that can happen? You know, this thing doesn't turn out looking good, but you know, I mean, I go through that as well. just like anyone else. It's like, ooh, you know, that's kind of weird right there. I usually don't think about it in terms of, you know, oh, I'm going to stop or something like that. I just see it as, I don't know. You know, in kind of a rationalize. I see it, you know, as kind of like, okay, this is going to be an opportunity or something like that. But I do. I mean, I don't think about things too much. I mean, I just keep working the piece and seeing where it goes, though, just in general. Seeing if I can kind of discover some solutions along the way. And like I said, I mean, I wasn't even thinking about using my little islands in here, but I think that might kind of help. Okay, now this is a lighter green. I'm going to start moving into some of these lighter tones. And when you go light, then dark, then back to light again, I mean, I didn't use this one here, but it just, things can kind of smooth out a little bit. It tends to kind of blend things in, and I don't know, this is where I kind of get my, discover a lot of solutions to marks that are standing out to me as something that, you know, are kind of undesirable in their current incarnation, you know. They might provide me a kind of a building block for other things to come, though. So it's not, if you get something down there that you don't really like, it's not necessarily kind of a bad thing, because while it might not work on the surface like this, if you layer something over the top of it, it might be providing a good base layer, or a kind of a underglow to kind of more of the surface area final result. Okay. So see, this is already starting to build up. It's looking a little bit more kind of watery, you know, type. You know, I'm getting a little bit more of kind of something in the spirit of what I'm hoping to achieve here. Still a lot of questions, though, on this one. You know, there's a lot of... sometimes I can kind of tell where something's starting to go at some point in time. I wouldn't really say that anything's kind of... there's any more clarity, you know, than when I first started on this one. But I think we're kind of getting towards that... kind of point where, you know, some things, at least in terms of this background here, start to become a little bit more apparent. All right, this is going back to the yellow. Look at that kind of glow there. Okay. Now, I'm not completely moving this stuff around. A lot of this stuff it's kind of set, but, you know, we can kind of manipulate it a little bit. I mean, it's certainly getting brighter. This is what kind of surprises me about this. I lay down that first layer, and then it kind of dries a little bit dull. Then you start building up these layers, and the more you build up, it can potentially get brighter and brighter, which doesn't always work with some types of, like, say, dye-based inks. You know, no matter how much you build up, it kind of changes when it dries. This one here, it's after a certain point of time, it does stay pretty true to the original vibrancy. It might dry a touch duller, though. I don't know. I need to experiment more with that. But that's the kind of the notion I have so far from using these. And I haven't done hundreds of pieces with this type of ink, so I wouldn't say to have it wired or anything like that. you know, a lot more experimentation is necessary. Okay, I kind of like this area up here and kind of smooth. Kind of feeling it has so far. I need to move some stamps here. Look at this. It's like a Jenga tower of stamps. Let me get this higher up in the field of view here. Okay. All right. I don't know how much I want to add in here. Like I said, I was thinking about those islands, and that might look pretty good. Definitely the reeds. Okay. Okay, yeah, I think I'm going to kind of ground some of this in here a little bit with some harder forms. Let me grab my islands stamps. Or actually, well, let me go in a little bit more here before I get to those. Let me address a little bit more of the background here. I'm taking a look at this, and I think I might want some more kind of darker areas in that. I want to transition it a little bit more towards the darker tones before I go to kind of dark impressions within this space. Okay, so this is Asteroid Umber. Good color name, I guess. They're all kind of the, you know, that Moonlight Duo. They're all kind of a celestial type of naming convention that are kind of cool. Okay, so this isn't as dark as I thought it would be, but it's kind of nice because it blends with these colors already laid down really nicely. Maybe, you know, it's better that it's not so dark. In fact, it's kind of this just a mellow kind of a tint of just a darker tone. It's hard to tell exactly what it would look like as I'm putting it over the tops of these other colors, you know. And these inks are a little bit translucent. They're not opaque. Okay. Okay. Let me pause this video and let me grab a couple of images. Okay, I have a bunch of different images here. There are these island stamps out of a certain nature set. And I'll use some of them. I won't use them everywhere. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I might use it a little bit more than I think I will, but let's give them a try. The kind of provide me a little bit of a foundation for some of the foliage that I'm using. So it's not going to be representative of some island, you know. It'll just be like some kind of little mound of, you know, earth or dirt or something like that. Okay, now this one I'm doing in that umber. I'm kind of doing a light shade right now. Okay. Stands out a little bit too much for me, so I'm going to blend a little bit. I'll blend that one out as well. It'll be kind of a little bit more subdued. Let's go with the kind of a black and umber blend, and let's go for another impression of it out here. Kind of a darker one on the perimeter, maybe. Yeah, it doesn't show up as black at all. That's alright. Okay, alright, what color do I have here? Let's try it. Let's just ink it up just straight in black. What I was like, put umber on it, and I kind of dabbed in the black a little bit, but the umber was so wet, none of that black applied, which is, I think, what happened. Okay, I think this one's called Island Large or something like that. I think it's the largest of them. Okay. These are all going to get covered up too, so it's, you know, we won't have too much of a repetition of form because we won't be able to really tell what the form is behind all the foliage that we're going to be adding into the piece. It's kind of giving me well, those two are pretty good impressions right there. I was going to say, stamping kind of wet into damp, you know, with this thick paint-like, almost paint-like media, it's giving me a kind of a real loose type of impression in terms of it being slightly kind of, you know, puddled up in here, and then the impression, as you lift off, wet off of wet, it kind of lifts some of that impression as well. You know, so the ink didn't fully transfer. Okay, so I'm just kind of creating this little infrastructure for these wetlands right here. Okay. So I'm creating this little inlet of, you know, grassy formations. Ooh, that one slid. But like I said, you know, there's going to be a bunch of stuff in front of it anyway, so I don't really care. It's just, these are all just kind of providing me the building blocks for what is to come. Okay, so that is the Island Large. Let's give it a little bit of variation too. I don't want everything that exact shape, even though this shape's going to be rather obscured, or very obscured. Okay, I think I need another size of block. I don't like having this real big, you know, square. I kind of need a narrower, long one. I'll order that from my supplier sometime. He's the same guy that makes all my the rubber for Stampscapes, which is Rubber Stamping Depot, Rubber Stamping Concepts. They went by two different names at different times, or different names. I think it's still rubberstampingdepot.com or something like that. Always kind of confused me, so I asked him about it last time. Alright, I think, I don't know, this island medium, I think, probably. Has that little trailing side to it. Alright, these ones are just being done in black, just for some variation. Okay. Let me go for one more in the background there. They look like a bunch of marching slugs or something like that. Okay. I think that'll do it. All right, now I'm kind of debating on if I want to add something here in the foreground, like a piece of land. Maybe not. Okay, so, I mean, I can always add it later. Okay, so we're going to add a bunch of foliage into this piece, and I want to go a little bit more freeform than I went last time. Maybe using a few more types of colors here. And we're going to use a lot. It's going to look, I don't know, kind of disconnected a little bit, because we need to do these in multiple tones for sure to kind of bring everything around. Actually, here's the thing that I kind of realized last time too. I need to blend these, some of these forms in before I stamp some of this out, because I want this to be, you know, relatively crisp in terms of the impressions. So let's go back to this now. I think it's going to be the umber and black that we blend these pieces in, these islands in with. So let's give that a try here. It'll ground them a little bit and give them some mass and visual weight by adding the shadow. I'm just going to use the same applicator here that I was using before. Paper towel. Okay. Some of this is going to get really blurry because those impressions are still kind of wet. But I'm good with that, you know, in terms of kind of creating that kind of loose, atmospheric type of effect that I'm going for. Okay, now it's a little bit harsh right there, so I'm going to have to blend that out, going back to, see, I'm going in with the dark, and I'll blend it back out with the lighter color here. And those impressions are really wet right now, so it's really kind of dragging them. I almost don't need to ink up here at all. In fact, let me go to a drier one like this, just so I'm kind of dry brushing that around. It's almost too dry. Not for that one, though. Just kind of totally smearing those images. I mean, I can wait for that to dry, but I don't want that. I kind of want them to be, in this case, yeah, pretty blurred out. Okay, I'm going on the brown ones right now, the umbers. I'll move into that black after this. Okay, it's go into the black. This one's really dried quite a bit for some reason. Okay, let me get a little umber on this one. Starting to going into some of these wet areas. Oops, too much. I can remedy that, I think. So that's why I'll dip into the abilities of these inks here and able to kind of remedy some unwanted types of applications. Okay, so we have that. Oh, I forgot about this one up here. Don't forget any of them. Ooh, boy, that is really smeared out. Okay. Kind of moved it back into that dreamy kind of atmosphere there. See, that's what you have. You can call it if you're going on there with something and it doesn't look right, like totally smeared out. In this case, you call it dreamy instead of like ugly or something like that, or totally smeared. You just call it dreamy. All right, going back in with the yellow. Okay. Let's see if we can blend some of this in. Kind of smooth things out a little bit. Or smooth things out a lot. Kind of incorporate... Ooh, I'm getting rid of that one completely there. It's barely visible. It's like a ghost of that island now. Different characteristics for different inks, maybe. Black one really kind of set in harder. This one's a little bit... the umber is just is really super wet still. Okay. Right. Alright, I think that is about enough of that. Kind of decipher if what other things we need in here before I start addressing some of the other colors to come. Alright, let me see if I have a little bit of this paper towel left. It's not too bad, 11 by 70, that's a lot of ink application. Let's go in with some white in here now. Okay, I'll just use the white off of this, the sunshine yellow right now. Alright, so taking some of that, and I want to add some kind of highlights in here. Areas at least. Just a little bit of white in here. Maybe down, kind of down the middle. A little bit more of a center of focus area. It's subtle right now, okay? Actually, I might need to get going with a little bit of a thicker application of white. Let me just go to my white pad here. This is a Hero Art Unicorn. A little bit more white in this one. I need to be careful because I don't want to pollute this one. I'll just add some little bit of kind of highlights here and there around in some areas. Okay, kind of oscillate it a little bit here and there type of thing, so you get this little shimmer happening throughout the piece. Yeah, it's just kind of, it's whatever it's kind of reflecting that's up above on the shore, whatever. This white tends to kind of mellow things out a little bit too, a little bit. There was this big old black smudge there from something I don't remember doing, so you just cover it up with white up there. All right, I think that will do it for that. Okay, time to add in some foliage, I think. And then we have some blending to do after that, but let's see how this looks. Okay. Space moss, is that it? Yes. Getting those names down. Okay. I'm going to put him at the base of these little mounds. This is the reeds, large, by the way. Now I'm not going to just do this all in one color. We'll vary it a touch. Okay, now I'm going to use the same size one in the background as well. We can use some smaller ones too, just to kind of push the perspective slightly, but I'm going to keep this space in here fairly contained and close up. Okay, let's see. I'm going to mask off some of these little hilly areas and put some of this grass coming out from behind, some of those reed formations coming out from behind those areas. I can also have them just kind of isolated in the water too. They don't have to always be kind of right up next to something. Kind of have some of the hills showing the island. Kind of really getting filled in, huh? All right, let's start moving into kind of the heavier impressions of this. Same stamp, and let's go to black. The lighter impressions will be kind of a little bit more reflective of those reeds a little bit farther off in the distance. Okay, I'm just using the hybriding black in here. Kind of putting them a little bit off center. Starting to look a little bit busy, but we'll try to remedy that later. Okay, this is what we're looking at. A lot of repetition there of form. We'll need to break that up somewhat and make it a little bit more harmonious, I guess you can say. But let's see. I need the smaller version of the reeds again. Let's see. Where did it go? I've been doing so much stamping. Stamps everywhere. Alright, here it is. change your scale a little bit. All right, boy, that is a big textural surface right there. Kind of a busy, crazy, too much. But let's see what we can do with it. Okay, so, boy, this is a big piece. We're going to try to blend some of it in. Let's go with, I'm going to use a sponge tip right here. I need to get in some kind of specific areas, and this is going to provide me a little bit of the touch that I might want. That is really super juicy right now. Okay, so I don't need to add any more ink. I just need to kind of blend things out a touch. It's kind of interesting when I blend in, it's kind of erasing some of this too. If I was gutsy, I would just blend in that whole area. It's a little bit too busy. Let me see. Let me see how this goes here. I wanted impressionism. Do I go for that here? Alright, I guess I'm going for it. This is one of those examples of a kind of extreme version of a, or journey, extreme version of the journey of a work in progress. You know, I was saying that you can kind of change the spirit of, or really change things around quite a bit. Oh my gosh. All right, now that's hard to get rid of right there. Okay. Okay. Alright, if I'm doing that, I don't need this. Let me grab that paper towel. Let me go back to that yellow too. Sunshine yellow. It's kind of interesting how some of this comes off, no problem. Some of it kind of stains. It's that, I guess that's that nature of kind of that half and half, or whatever, you know, kind of ratio the hybrids, the pigment is to the dye. Boy, that is a big sloppy mess. That is for sure. I don't think anyone would disagree with me that's watching this, right? Alright, let's go back in. Let's kind of reestablish some of these variations in here if we can. A little bit of a brighter tone. This is that really super bright green. God, that is really remarkable. That is just erasing away some of that image that's down there. Look at that, it's like light in that space. So right now, what's going through in my mind is how I'm going to utilize this surface right here to create something. I'm getting a little bit more of that kind of painterly feel, but I do have a lot of stained types of images on this right now that I'll have to kind of incorporate into the piece. Okay, let's see. I that. Let's go back to some of these other colors as well. Let's go this orange. Alright, I think it's time I, use a new paper towel here. Okay, I want to maintain this kind of it's all greens up here now, but I do want to maintain some of these, kind of brighter tones down here. I think I need larger forms on this. This is just, it's such a large piece right here. I think I might want to just absolutely change the, kind of my concept for the entire composition if I can. I think I might be able to. I'm not sure, but we'll see how it goes. Okay. One of the things that I believe, though, that I think I'll need to do is I think I need to allow this to set up a little bit and dry. Because, as we can see, it's like super malleable. You can stamp something out and practically, just wipe it right out, with some additional tone like that. Just laid right over the top of it. It's really pretty amazing. Okay, but yeah. Let me strategize right here on this piece and think of some different imagery to be used in here. And how we can we'll see if we can just kind of cover it up. And then we'll go from there. All right, so allowing to dry a little bit. I don't want it completely dry. I want it still a touch malleable, but I don't want it so malleable and wet on the surface that when I stamp something out, it's not giving me a good impression. All right, so maybe about 5-10 minutes. Okay, I'm going to completely change up on the composition of this scene background into something a little bit more substantial. It was just too big for a bunch of those reeds like that. It was too monotonous. Okay, so we might have some of those elements in here, but now, because of the staining of the surface of those forms, I need to go over it with something that's going to be substantial enough to cover up those areas. Okay, so this is really a prime example of scenic stamping being a form of stamping that's really quite malleable. Okay, I've never done it like this to this degree before, but we'll see how it goes. Okay. All right, so these are Brookside boulders. They're just some really big rocks, and I'll need to repeat this throughout the piece here, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, it's a pretty good cover-up. I'll be toning in some more colors into these forms that I'm stamping out here, and giving the forms more volume and visual weight. All right, so yeah, I don't. I always believe that scenic stamping is something where you can really change things around, because I know that. But I'm usually talking about, especially when we're working on a card-sized piece of paper, something really small. We're not talking about something as vast as this. So, yeah, just a really extreme example of kind of what we've been referring to when it comes to kind of scenic repair. Scenic repairs, for lack of a better term. If this piece comes out, I'll be quite happy. If it comes out really good, even more so. Okay, I've been wanting to do, ever since I've used this, Brookside Boulders in another scene recently, I've been wanting to just come up with a really large piece, more, you know, kind of more focused around this one. Not necessarily like this, but, you know, in a smaller format scene. But I'll see what I can do here. Okay, so I have those two right there. I'm going to have another one right in here, and then we're going to mask off these two. Okay. So I'm going to be I'm going to be leaning on this one quite a bit to create this massive cover-up, and I don't know if it's 180-degree turn in terms of the composition, but if it's not, it's quite a bit. Okay, I've let this background dry, or set up about 20 minutes, I would say. So pretty decent amount of time. Doing a little masking here because I'm going to be doing a lot of overlap here. Okay. Go down about like so. Ooh, that really soaked through there and got some of that orange on there. Boy, that ink remains pretty wet on there for a while. Oh, I'm talking about on the paper towel. Okay, but anyways, that's a pretty seamless transition right in there. Okay. Let's go right there in the background. I can use some other different types of imagery too. I can use something with a strong silhouette. But I think we're just gonna go. Let's go with more of these rocks. Okay, I'll go back about like so. Very, very forgiving nature of the hybrid inks. I think I'll need to let this, let these images kind of set up a little bit too, before I go in with the tones, the additional toning on them. I want to use some different images behind these rocks. But let me get another one up there. whole lot of cover-up needed on this scene. Repair work. Have to be a little bit more inventive, I think. You're doing this type of the sheer degree of kind of compositional changes within the piece. Okay. Alright, that's the Brookside Boulders. And a really good kind of accompanying stamp is the boulders with lichen like that. I could build up too, you know, a much bigger wall, or I can have this in the foreground as well. So it'll change up a little bit, you know. I mean, this in something like this, when you were talking about such a large area, there's a lot of potential for that something to look really quite repetitive on there. So the challenge is always to add variation to try to remedy any potential monotony going on within the piece. So let me add a cap of, kind of a cap off these rocks right here, making it look a little bit more continuous back here. Okay, I'm just using a small portion of it. Like that. Okay, so that kind of closes off the top up there. Okay, let's add a little bit of a foreground down here. This is the thing that I kind of wanted to do anyway in the beginning, but I didn't when I had that other composition in mind. Not necessarily with this one, but just any type of image kind of down here. I usually like to kind of set up some kind of visual situation where it's like us looking into the scene from some shoreline or something of that sort, rather than, you know, like it's a kind of this invisible eye in the sky type of thing, or like drone footage of something. Okay, so there's that down there. Okay. Yeah, let's do this in a little bit of, or quite a bit of layering in this piece, in terms of kind of allowing things to set up a little bit more before we go back into it. Okay, so I'm going to have to let this set up. You know, we saw how that kind of black can really kind of just wipe right off, you know, before, like that reed down there. So I don't know, maybe 10-15 minutes on this one. It's hard to tell. What I'll do is, you can kind of tell if something's wet, and you can kind of put the light on it, and if it's real shimmery and reflective like that, chances are it's still pretty wet, so we'll be able to tell when we can kind of start going back in here and adding more tone without losing the image itself. All right, so a little bit more time. All right, we're back. Yeah, I gave it about 15 minutes, and it's still a little bit wet, but I don't feel like waiting. And I feel like just getting into the piece. I'm excited to see what comes about from this piece. I still don't know exactly what direction I'm going to be taking in, or trying to take it in, but we'll see. All right, so I can see that this the bolder impressions are still wet in some areas, and they actually are, when they dry, they are quite a bit lighter in value than what they look like when they're wet. So I'll need to keep that in mind with how dark I take the shadows in here. Okay, so there's some different ways we can go with these shadows. I think I'm going to go with a little bit of green in terms of adding some volume to these rocks. So I'm going to try to be hitting the rocks with a little bit of tone from the bottom up, okay? Leaving the tops of them a little bit lighter, okay, so they can look a little bit more dimensional that way. Alright, so I'm just using my stylus tool, and let's see if I can zoom in here. I'll try to remember to zoom out when I need to. Apologize for all the times in these videos when I kind of zoom in like this to get a closer look, then I end up like working down here or something like that. I need to have some kind of like zoom out notation here in front of me, like a little sign that I could put down so I remember to keep the field of view in or where I'm working in the field of view. Okay, so just kind of, I don't know, these rocks are going to be kind of moss covered, I guess. I'm working with kind of that darker green, the space moss. Now I think what I'm going to do from a tonal strategy is I think I'm going to make things quite a bit darker just to compensate for a lot of the different forms in here that are kind of ghost forms at this time because I wiped them off. Okay, let's move up a little bit. These rocks. So yeah, there's a lot of tone in them and texture, but it's really up to, after you stamp them out, it's a good idea to take the color scheme that you're working in, or you can go with a different color scheme for the rocks, and add this extra tone to them to really kind of add visual weight to them and round them off in terms of appearing three-dimensionally, giving it that illusion. So it just, they're anchored a little bit more too into position. And especially I'll add some shadows down here as well. A lot of rocks to do, but it's such a large piece here. Okay, that kind of that smudgy orange down there. I'll kind of blend that in a little bit. Kind of going with more of a tapping motion when applying this, just because you know, the ink is not completely dry in some areas. So if I do kind of a streaking, it'll have a tendency of you know, wiping that wet ink off. So if you kind of dab it like this, you're not, you know, applying that type of pressure and motion into those objects. You know, the wet objects. All right, and we have our foreground down here. There isn't really a kind of a base to these rocks down here, but it's just a matter of kind of giving it a little bit more color and oscillating the use of some light and darks within that space, just to give it a little bit of more variation. And when you do that variation like that, it contributes to lighting. All right. So we have those mossy rocks. Let's zoom out here. Okay. All right. Let's go to the asteroid umber. Okay. Let's see if we can get a kind of a darker version of that down. When I was wiping it on, it didn't take on the spirit of too much of a darker tone because it was. I think when I was rubbing it on like that, it was almost removing a lot of ink that was already applied, you know, with the different colors. So we'll kind of dab it around, and then and then we'll kind of blend it in a little bit too, as it tapers off. But where I want it the darkest, I will do it in tapping motion. And most of it kind of down at the base of the rocks. I'll have it going into the rocks a little bit too to get a little bit more blends blending happening. Kind of adding that those shadows down there like that. I think up there it would be best with a paper towel. Okay, like this. Okay. As I'm kind of moving the paper in a direction that's the most ideally suited for the application I'm doing. Okay, I can just see the bottom side of the rock from this angle too. It's easier for me to get a more targeted application of this color. Kind of darkening it in quite a bit up there, just to kind of bring more of the focal, you know, the attention down into the lower area. by kind of adding shadows, it groups the different imagery as well. So groups, unifies, given spaces, and objects. So you can group them kind of by shape and also by lighting. In this case, it's the shadows. But shadows are a part of lighting, right? And boy, has this piece changed in spirit as we speak. And those little streaks into the water, you can see where I've built up the tone in these given areas like that. In fact, I like that. I'll kind of add a little bit more so that I can kind of add these kind of negative space streaks into it, kind of light into dark, kind of wisps and motions. Go too much, then just tone it right back in, and kind of until you get the kind of the look you're going after. Alright, that's the burnt umber. Let's go back to something a little bit brighter. Brighter days ahead. Let's see here. Let's try this one. Let's try the Martian green again. Let's see if we can get a little bit of a different blends in here. Doesn't look Martian because I have a lot of the umber on this, but let's just kind of layer it in there. Oops, I went to my white side, but hey, that's what these pads are kind of made for. In fact, I should blend in a little bit of that white into the area, those areas as well. kind of working at obscuring some of those previous impressions in here, just with some more ink. But I'm also, the more I do this, the more kind of the more buildup and some of these kind of nice, kind of painterly types of streaks I'm able to apply into those spaces, which is kind of what I want. I want that kind of streaky, kind of dreamy, real painterly type of, I don't know, look to it. It's almost like watercolors, like washes or something. I tend to like those types of textures in pieces. After all, I mean, it was kind of, I wanted to go for that initially, that, that kind of impressionistic type of spirit in here. And again, it's just, I don't know, that's the notion in terms of that, how that goes. I don't really expect to get that, but that's the kind of the inspiration, at least, where it kind of ends up is oftentimes, as we can see here, quite different, than the initial inspiration or even expectations, maybe sometimes. All right, this area down here is getting a little bit muddy. Okay, but look at that. I can cut that right back in there, like so. That's what I like about these pieces. You can go and add light back into dark, like that. And I don't know, this area down here was applied, I don't know, a couple minutes ago, so it gives you a little bit of time to do those types of things. This is where I was mentioning to someone else that's been working in this ink. There's this kind of, I feel like I'm doing a painting here. I mean, doesn't it look like a painting? Which is kind of fun, especially if you're not a painter like me, I'm not. So, I don't know, just kind of gives one somewhat of a sensation, I guess in one matter of, using these inks like this. It's a potential, it's a potential sensation. Okay, this area down here is quite dry, so... I think I want to go in here with some brighter colors, but why don't we go in with some black now into these shadows, okay? bit of a different tone, texture, but also it's kind of muting things. It's kind of turning it a little bit foggier and less distinct, okay? Which is kind of nice because that might contrast nicely against some other things that we end up doing in the piece, in the form of some different additional imagery. So you have the kind of oscillation between dark and light, and also crisp and diffused. All right, now as I'm adding this down, I feel like there's a little bit of a kind of a lifting of some tones, so I need to be careful about that if I want to keep it as dark as it is in that on those given objects and areas. So just, do a little bit more tapping and less wiping or whatnot. Or if it's coming off with a tap, then tap lighter. And if it's still coming off, then you maybe just need to let it set up a little bit more before you kind of address it with some additional color tone. A little bit more rounding of the forms. A little bit of subduing of the background with darker tones, like that. Just kind of framing it off a little bit, the piece in general. Okay, let's take a look at this, see where we are. Okay. That area up there is really addressed quite sufficiently, I would say, to say the least. We've really darkened it up there. It's really delicate if I kind of tap on there lightly, then I'm applying with just a little bit more pressure and I'm removing. It is allowing me that amount of ink though, and that dynamic is really allowing me to get a really good blend though. It's like I can really move those colors around quite a bit. Okay, let's get a little bit down here. Kind of the balanced catty corner, you know. All right. Quite a bit of work on that session right there. That black is super wet right there though. So we're really going to have to let that set up here. But check it out. It's really, there's a lot of, gosh, this is so huge. There's a lot of work that went into kind of, it's basically a vignette. It's darker around the perimeter like this, okay? But then you just come into these areas a little bit more around those objects, like that. All right, so I can't believe all those other images that were in there before. So pretty decent cover-up. I can still see the ghosting of them, like right in here. But we'll go in there and address that with some additional colors and whatnot, and hopefully make the areas in here kind of glisten and shimmer a little bit more with some additional textures that we'll be adding in there. But the biggest question is what additional stamps I'll be adding to the mix here. It's almost kind of interesting as kind of just as a statement of this location without anything additionally, but I think we can add in some other forms in here that will kind of enhance what we already have here in this little kind of glistening pool, right? All right, I think I have a strategy for this. It's going to be a very experimental. I don't want to be wiping off the entire composition again. But I think we're going to go for some large foliage and coming off of various rocks in different values and colors, so we'll have to see how that goes. I think I'm going to be just kind of playing around with a lot of different potential color schemes for the imagery that I'm going to be using, and I don't exactly have kind of an answer for what or experience doing this degree of layering on top of here. I've been playing around with it a little bit with some of the recent scenes that I've been working on, but largely kind of unexplored terrain that I'm going to be entering here. So let's just see how it goes, and I don't know. Here, let's do this right now. I want to see what some of these impressions would look like. Just with different kind of degrees of color blends within the image itself. Okay. And we'll see what some of these different combinations look like. Okay, so that's Mars Red and that asteroid Umber. Okay, I think that looks pretty good there. Just in terms of the colors. I think I might be able to even push it a little bit further. Okay, so adding some, this is the stamp just called Leaves. Okay. I want to get pretty good coverage of this one. Kind of missing some areas here. I want to get right there. Okay. And let's see if we can get a little bit more variation in that. Let's go with some orange here. So dab off some of that red. I have absolutely no idea how much is being applied here. This is part where I'm just not completely familiar with this. We might even be able to blend in a little bit of green into some of these leaves, like the just the changing of the the colors within this given space or given form. All right, now I did a ton of blending on there. I don't want to. I don't think I want to. Well, I was going to say I don't want to test it out again because I want that coloring. I spent a lot of time doing that coloring on there. Okay, that was a little bit of this plum looking nebula burst color. I want this coming out from behind this rock right here, okay? So a fairly significant impression in terms of the location of it. I'm going to have it coming out from behind this rock. Okay. Like so. We want to put these types of fall foliage colors into the imagery here, just so it kind of makes sense in terms of a grander scheme of things, that there is some foliage around that, we're getting these types of water reflections reflecting. Okay. All right, so that is that. That is really light. Why that came out much lighter? I guess I took off more of it than I thought. It's either that or it's just not stamping out real dark right there. Okay, so there's that. Let's go for some darker impressions of it then too. And I'll sandwich it. I'll go some darker ones. Impressions maybe in the foreground. Or, not in the foreground, but in front of that impression. So I'll have some dark and light within that space. Okay, so I just went with black on there. And let's go with a pretty bold red in here as well. Okay. You got a lot of black in that pad right there. I'm just wiping it off. Okay. I'll just mask off a certain portion of this rock right here. Let me see, where did my mask go? Oh, I think it was that one. Alright, I'm going going to hold this down longer. I have a feeling that that first one didn't give me the impression I quite wanted because I think it's the surface is just so sealed off. So I think you have to kind of hold. Doesn't mean you press harder, but just kind of hold longer for that ink to transfer. Perhaps, I don't know. We'll have to see if it works out or not. Okay, not too bad. Boy, that sure is light again. It's really stamping light, okay? So this is the type of stuff I have to learn here. Let's just go straight black and let's see how dark that is. I gotta think it would be as dark as the boulders, Brookside boulders, but I don't know. Okay. Okay, that's actually what I'm going after right there. A lot more black. Kind of interspersed with a little bit of that extra color, okay? Kind of looks weird right there because it's the only thing like that around this whole area, so we'll have to try to add a little bit more. Okay, let's just go with straight black here. I'm going to leave off this kind of offshoot, that branch right there, and leaves, just so I don't get too much of a repetition of form within this space. I don't want it to look too monotonous. Okay. That. Okay, I'm going pretty dark over in this area, just because it's a darker area than over here, so you have to go pretty dark for it to show up. Alright, I don't want to do too much overkill here. Let's go with just that impression right there. Okay. Now we need to do it on the other side as well to give it a little bit of balance. Maybe back here. Let's try this. Let's go with some black. And I don't know if it'll show up at all, but let me try a little bit of the space marks. I am really running out of room here. I'm just masking off some of those rocks, like the branches kind of growing out of cracks in the rock, or spaces. That's where the plant has gotten a nice foothold, in terms of the roots. Okay, like that. I like that black and green though. That looks pretty good. That. Now that's going to dry, and it'll dry lighter than how it looks right now too. So, a little ways to go on that one in terms of kind of the appearance of what it'll take, kind of on a permanent basis. Okay. Okay, another one. Kind of adding it into the shadows, and I'm kind of trying to obscure and push back into the distance some of those ghost impressions from the previous compositional arrangement. Okay, is that right back there? Certainly is looking different though, isn't it? It's kind of interesting though. Here's the thing. As I'm adding these on here, I'm not adding any additional green up top here, but when I stamp it out, it's darker down here and kind of green up on the tips here. I don't know, maybe that was from the previous impression. Maybe it didn't all kind of transfer over or something like that. I'm not really sure. It might have had some residual ink on it. But you'd think that when I inked up with the new black, if there was any green left on the tips, it would have been buried under, that new application of ink, but I don't know, it's not. Because it's one of the things, I do like working with these inks here and kind of the different types of effects you can get from them, but I don't know, it surprises me a lot as well. Okay, there's a lot going on over there. Let's put another one over here just for a little bit more balance again. I keep saying that, but that's what kind of keeps presenting itself. When you add something over here, then you kind of want to kind of bring things back around in terms of an overall kind of visual weight and textural weight, I guess. So this over here kind of balances off that side. All right. All right, now here's the big ones that I was thinking about doing. I use this as an underwater scene. I think this will be potentially something that we can add in here and do it in some sort of color that might be, color scheme that might be interesting. It's hard to tell what that color scheme might be. I think it's going to just have to be a combination of things, but I do want to go fairly bold with it, in terms of like a red or something like that. But we'll see what we get here. Okay, maybe I will do a test print of this one. I'm not sure. I might just get bold and gutsy and just go right on into it. It's kind of the spirit to take with your pieces in a way, but I don't know. I'm getting into quite a few hours on this piece right here, and I do want there to be a certain slight degree of predictability with this. Maybe. Okay, adding a little bit of this red on these leaf tips here. Okay. I'm just going to go for it. So this will give us some scale, and kind of it'll open up the field of view, or the depth of field, I guess, with something kind of these leaves maybe representing a larger version of those ones, a little bit more stylized, but I think it'll work for that. Yeah, okay. So right there, that was some black, some of that brown, red on the tips like that. Okay, let's go for, I don't want to address them, all the impressions the same, so let's just go straight black like that. I'm not pressing too hard, but I'm just kind of making sure that that's nice and even on there. And then we'll allow that ink to possibly transfer to the page a little bit more. Sometimes with these little thick inks too, sometimes when I'm pressing down, I think I'm pressing and it's kind of pressing the ink out, and then when I lift it, it kind of vacuums out, so I get this little bit of like ghosting happening. It just depends how wet this is and how wet the surface is, with that vacuum type of feel. Okay, that was just all straight black, but it merged with some of the colors that were already down there, but I kind of like that. There's a little tinge of like red up there. Okay, and see that over here in this area, I'll add a couple impressions, I think. Looks more olive than black, but that's fine because it's kind of in the spirit of the overall color scheme, isn't it? I need to clear off my desk here. I need a lot of space for such a gigantic scene. It's hard to kind of rotate this around, so kind of overlapping everything. Okay. Just going for these top ones right here. Okay. Can you pick this up? All right. Oh, one more, I think. I lied. Two more, I think. One more after that one. We needed to go up the side, I think, a little bit more. Like right over here. Just to kind of come in front of some of these other objects as well. You know, the Brookside boulders, and just to sandwich it a little bit, you know, because there is so much repetition of that form throughout. Okay. Okay. Now I have the smaller one. And I think that will provide a little bit more variation. Okay, let's go with the umber. And let's go with more of this plum one right here. Just on a couple of tips of leaves, I think. And we'll put it behind this front rock. Hopefully it looks kind of in harmony with the rest of the forms. It gives us a little bit of variation. Can't find the color that I just used. Where is that? Oh, there it is. How did that end up underneath there? Let's add a little bit of green to this one, I think. Okay, a little bit in the foreground down here. Okay, I think I need to really wait for this to dry off here, so I'll give this one a couple hours. This is looking a little bit busy in here to me, so I'll have to kind of find some kind of solution for that when we get to it. But otherwise, looking okay. I'll figure out some other types of things to add to this. In these different spaces, I think I might want to add a little bit more brightness to some of these areas in here. And I might add, this is the bird that I'm really thinking about adding down in here. Just as kind of a visual focal point. But, I don't know, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I'm not really quite sure yet what I'll do. If I do add something like this, I'll have to kind of make some other adjustments in here as well. So we'll figure it out then. Sometimes taking a little bit of a break and letting things just kind of settle, you know, kind of reveals some additional design possibilities. So, yeah. Okay, so until the next one, session. Some of these reeds might look good in here too. We'll figure it out. Okay, back again. Seems to be a pattern with this piece, but I really like what I see. I like how the colors just kind of mellowed out a little bit, or a lot, and it just seems a lot more integrated, I guess. You know, the forms are all integrated really nicely. It kind of stood out and didn't really blend in real well before. That's when it was wet. There was like wet areas against dry, but I don't know, looking pretty good here. I'm saying that as a matter, you know, as a kind of a point of the inks, not my abilities or anything like that. I don't know, it all comes together in the end with these inks I'm finding. Okay, so just kind of mellowing out a little bit of the contrast between some of these branches. Some of these branches are a little bit busy against the background, so what I do is I decrease the contrast a little bit between those forms and the background, and it just kind of integrates them a little bit more. Going for a little bit more of a rounding of forms in here. I'm going to leave this, I think, largely as is, without adding too much more imagery, if any, to the piece. But we'll see. I always say that, and something comes to mind. It's like, oh, I think this one last touch or something like that might be fitting for the composition. All right, let's see. This piece of paper, when you get things so saturated with ink, this feels like a different, you know, it feels different, I guess. There's so much ink in there. It doesn't feel like a piece of paper to me anymore. Kind of bringing out this rock right here a little bit more by making the area in back of it a little bit darker. We're doing a little bit of a kind of refinement tweaks to the piece now. Nothing too major, it's just kind of like pushing and pulling a little bit. Okay. All right. This has been a different experience for me here, working on this piece. It's really taken me on a bit of a journey here, that's to say the least. And that's always one of the, kind of the fun things about stamping. Some of them are very, I don't know, tranquil journeys. Most of them are. This one's been more of a, I don't know, it's kind of like a wild ride than anything. Okay, I'm going to try some other colors in here. We'll try to just accentuate the things that are working throughout this center area, I think. And I don't think I need to subdue anything. Let me see if I clean this off enough here. Okay, I'm going for more of this yellow. Okay. Just to kind of add a little bit of brightness in here. A little bit of brightness through there. That'll mellow out again, I take it. Okay. Now let's take some of this orange, I think. Add a few touches. I need more space. kind of trying to add in that kind of painterly touch into that area, even more so, and building it up. Building up a little bit more intensity and kind of a looseness to the surface here, so I can get a little bit of kind of the original intention, kind of infusing it back in there. I think it looked okay there, but you know, at this point in time, we might as well just kind of go for it and really see what we can do here. I mean, this scene has come a long ways. It's one of those things I always tell people, you know, you gotta kind of listen to the scene in many ways. The pieces might not end up kind of the way you kind of had it envisioned or planned for it, at least intended, but it might take you into a different area that, you know, could be even better. Most of the time it's just kind of different, but you can learn a lot along the way, though. You don't really learn quite as much when you just things kind of just happen as you intend them to, okay? Then it's just more of kind of the process by which to get from here to there. But when you have to kind of improvise along the way, the potential for learning is there. Kind of lightening up, brightening up some of these areas right in here. It may not dry to that look, but it's just another layer of media and tone on top of there that could give it a little bit of depth and additional life as a result. Okay, now I'm trying to determine if I want to add a little bit of a kind of a different I'm trying to bring up a photo right now on my computer. I want to look at some impressionist looks and see what that might look like. Yeah, my mouse isn't working. It's all really bright right in there. I'm trying to determine if I want to add in a little bit of this white to it. You know, just a little bit of a different effect. Okay, I'm not getting it right now. There's too much ink on my wand, I think. Okay, let me try to take some of this off. Okay, let's try it. Alright. think I've used a lot of that. I've wiped off a lot of this, I think, in the past. I need to get a re-inker for my white side of this pad here, I think. Alright, let's go to the, let's get my pigment ink pad. Just straight white. Okay, that's the Hero Arts one. Looks like I've got a little bit of yellow on there. Maybe I'll just use this. Okay, let's see here. Let's get a little bit of its texture in there, a little bit of kind of highlighting. I'll try to have it relatively kind of obscure, just a little bit of touches in here of a kind of a lighter shimmer like that right there. Okay. Okay, a little bit of a passageway of kind of the shimmer kind of coming around this way. All right, that is that. Let's grab this tiny rocks for a little bit more texture. All right, just a little bit of texture here, and let's go for some of this dark green and the black. some of this really shows up right now, but it might not when it dries, as it'll be much lighter and not as shiny right now, like it is right now. And I'm kind of counting on that in terms of the kind of overall look. Go for kind of a lighter impression by blotting it off once here. Okay, so there we have that. Just a little bit of additional texture right in there. Right in here. So that right there really shows up, but it'll kind of mellow out a little bit. I'm wondering if VersaFine will show up in there if I stamp something out. VersaFine is a oil-based pigment ink. I'm going to try it here. Or I changed my mind. It might stand out too much, and I want integration. I don't want kind of a separation of forms right now. So let's just use the hybrid black here. I'm going to do this one in a kind of a green as well, I think. Space moss. All right, and maybe I'll add a little bit of black at the bottom of it. I'm kind of stamping it over one of those areas where there was a little bit of a kind of a ghosting of the previous set of set of impressions. Okay, there's green, a little black. Okay, going for a little bit of depth in here. Here, there, there. Even fairly dimensional. All right, let's see if I can kind of blend, add a little bit of shadows at the base of these images without just kind of blurring them all out. Okay, let's see. Just trying to use a real delicate light touch. Adding a little bit of black. I'm tempted to do the kind of the reverse upside down impression of these reeds in a couple areas to represent the reflections, but I don't know if I want to do that. I think I don't want to do that if it's going to get it that area a little bit too busy with imagery and texture. All right, let me see if I can draw anything on the surface at all with some gel pen rollers. Okay. Adding some highlights to these red flowers. Just a touch of it. Kind of stands out a little bit too much. Orange would be better. Let's see. This is a kind of a peach color. These are Uniball Signo pens. I need to see if I can get some of these aren't working. Some of them are. Some of them I think I can get working again, but I gotta kind of whack them a little bit just to kind of break the seal or whatever is on there. Okay, so a little bit of peach. I'm just adding some little highlights to some of these leaves. And in a really large composition like this, I don't know, but it's not going to read from a distance, but I think kind of collectively, if you have little details here and there, I think it kind of reads just in general. The whole thing just I want it to kind of shimmer a little bit. Okay, so I'm just kind of adding a little bit of a highlight here and there. I also went over this area with white, so this is kind of adding a little bit of a good touch back into it. Just kind of outlining a little bit of that leaf there. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to focus. Yeah, right there. And I mean, I could bring it down into these ones as well. Okay, I really like this down in the water. Kind of just outlining some of the areas in the water. Let's see if I can get down here a little bit more. Okay. It's kind of just bring a little texture. There's some little strands of kind of red in here. I'm just kind of roughly going alongside of them. I mean, it could be anywhere. This is roughly the same value as that background, so it's not adding in too big of a mark, at least an obvious mark. But I'm getting a little. All right, I'm back after a night of downloading and compiling the first entire memory disk of this scene, video of the scene. And everything's mellowed out really well. I really like how these inks kind of dry, and there's kind of a uniformity to the material texture. Not that I'm not talking about the depth of the imagery, but just in terms of the overall kind of finish these inks tend to have. It kind of unifies things. The colors remain pretty much the same in terms of the saturation, but there's a sheen to it that kind of it settles, I guess, is the only word, or the word that comes to mind at least. But I'm going to kind of refine some areas in here. There were some areas in here that I thought looked a little anemic with that white paint that I put down. I like the white or the white pigment ink, but I like some areas to be a little bit brighter, so I'm going to go over them and kind of narrow those little strips of white, kind of highlighting, I guess. So I'm just doing that with some additional orange here, and I'll do it with the yellow. The gel pens look okay on here, but I don't think they don't contribute a lot. Maybe just in terms of just how much color has been added. It just seems like it's kind of something that's not really needed. It's real subtle in some areas, like in the water right here. I do like that kind of pastel orange, but I don't feel I need to add too much of it going forward in this piece. Okay, so that was a bit of yellow in here, and I think that looks better in terms of that little passage of color in here. You see what I'm talking about, where you can see the white in here? I'm just kind of subduing that a touch. I'm probably lifting some of it off as well. And some of these rocks can use a little bit more of a kind of a pop of color. It is more intense here. Okay, so when I'm doing this on some scenes, I find that I was saying that I think you get what you know, you see what you get in terms of the overall kind of intensity of colors. But see, that there, I mean, you can see where it's wet and where it's dry, okay? And I have glazed over it, so it does kind of mellow a little bit, at least in terms of this paper right here. And I'm saying that in reference to what I was talking about when I've used these inks before. I said that I think we you know, what we see is what we get, but not quite. There is a difference in terms of when it dries. More in terms of the texture, I think, than the saturation of it, okay? Okay, so looking at this piece, I was thinking there are some little refinements that I want to do. I want to add another pop of kind of a brighter color like that in terms of these foreground leaves. I think it could stand to use a little bit more of that type of impression. You know, just a pure red one. Or, I don't know, maybe with a little bit of tone down here. Just something kind of bold and bright. Okay, so that was red on here, and then I'll go a little bit with the burnt umber. I can't remember what I did on that one. It might have been a little bit of the green. This is going back to my old Stamp the Hand days of, you know, hand coloring all these plates, all these designs for these plates to be color copied for the types of mounts we used over there. Okay. All right. So just kind of following a line with that. Get another one right over here. I'll go about like that, I think. Just allowing that to hopefully transfer over as much of that ink as possible. The surface is really sealed with ink. And these inks do say they're, I don't understand about that part about how they're kind of waterproof. They're waterproof and permanent. So I don't know what they're kind of made out of. I don't know, are these oil-based? It doesn't seem like they would be because, oh, I love that impression right there. So that you really can't see the brown. It looks like yellow and orange, huh? Like a burnt orange. That is an umber, but the umber is so much darker though. But they gave us kind of a nice pairing of those two impressions. I think it can almost use another one right in here. Okay, I'm going to go for that. It's kind of interesting though, when I do all this coloring of this image, I just don't know what it's going to come out. I haven't done a lot of this type of coloring using these inks to this point, so it's pretty much giving me a different type of impression than maybe what I was expecting, or I don't know. I just don't know what I think I'm going to get a certain thing in terms of the amount of ink in one area, but when I stamp it out, it's not necessarily doing exactly that. There's a little bit of a surprise to it. It's never been kind of a negative surprise. Well, I think sometimes it's a little bit lighter than I anticipate, but a lot of times it's pretty cool. So I don't know. You just have to, with that type of thing kind of happening, if you run into media that way, it's just, you kind of have to embrace it if you're going to be using that. So I just kind of figure I'll get what I get, and you know, we'll wait and see type of thing. Okay, we'll let that ink transfer over there again. I think what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to use some of the smaller reed stamp in a watercolor to create a little bit more depth around where I stamp those reeds. And I don't know, there's just a little bit of fine-tuning left to go on this piece, and I think it's going to be done. A little bit of shading around those rocks as well, those little, the tiny rock stamp. Okay, now that, I like that, but when this dries, okay, it should look like it's in back of the darker ones. See that right there? See, it kind of, there was this lone impression with that type of color, but now we have more than one, and I think it harmonizes pretty well with that section right there. Okay, but I can't wait to see it. This is one of those instances where when I'm done, usually with dye based on glossy or, you know, that type of, those types of tones, I think it looks the best when it's wet, okay? And then, I mean, it comes back when you know, we spray seal it. Sometimes it even looks better than, you know, freshly stamped because of the color saturations. But on this type of thing, I think it looks best when it dries, just because everything kind of mellows out, and there's a unification aspect of it from a textural standpoint, but we still have the vibrancy of the colors, so it kind of, I really like that when that happens on the surface. There's a nice unification to the surface. Okay, this is that space moss here. I'm just adding a little bit of tone around these rocks, maybe giving them a little bit of a kind of a shadow. It's really, really light. I think that space moss, every time I use it, I think it's going to be a little bit darker, but it's really light in value when, at least where I'm applying it here, or how I apply it typically. I mean, that little area in there is really quite subtle. So in this scene right here, when I'm done, I'll have to do my concluding statement after it kind of sets up for a little bit. These are quite, it says it's fast drying, and it's not so fast drying when I have a million inks that I've just applied. And, okay, here's the umber. When there's a ton of inks on there that I just applied, it's really not fast drying. I think they're talking about fast drying in terms of, if you stamp something out, kind of on a dry piece of paper, you know, like an image, it'll dry pretty fast. But I'm doing, I don't know, just multiple layers of it, of colors of these inks. Okay, that is the burnt umber. And let's see, here's the small reeds, okay? I'm going to going to take that space moss and I'll ink up the entire stamp with that. But then at the base of it, I'm going to add, you know, more of this darkness, so it kind of transitions hopefully from a lighter tone to a darker tone. And again, these inks are so juicy. I'm not quite sure how much ink is being applied, because when I apply so much ink with this one, and then I think I'm inking up the bottom portion of this with the darker ink, maybe the stamp's already so wet that none of that ink from the pad is transferring onto the base of this one, you know, as far as the darker color goes. So, a little bit. I don't know, not too much. I think that happened to be. Maybe I'll ink this up a little bit like that. Okay, just the top portion of it, and maybe I'll just go straight black on the bottom like that. You know, so I won't ink up the whole thing. Let's try that. I mean, these are all like subtle little things here. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. No big deal. But I don't know, it's just kind of interesting that way. Okay, so I put one back there, and it's, you can kind of see it. Let me try to scrub a little bit of that black into that part. Maybe removing some of that green off the bottom. And we'll go over here. This is just giving things a little bit more depth from a spatial standpoint in those given areas like that. See that right back there? And let's just go with the black one too. What's happening too is with these impressions, this ink is just so, you know, the pads are new, so they're really super juicy, so the ink is kind of puddled up on here. And then when you press it, there's that wet surface area down there, so when you're pulling it off, there's like this suction that's happening. So there's kind of these, especially in the middle, it happened a lot with the tiny rocks, you know, that little surface area like that. So in the center there, I don't know, there's like a vacuum or like an air pocket where kind of the perimeters stamp out. And that's the same thing kind of with these leaves, but I'm just kind of going with it. Like, see the center of that leaf there? That ink kind of pulls out to the edge when you're sucking it up, because the center of it is creating this vacuum. And it creates that little pocket. But for me, I don't know, if I'm using these inks this way, like that, I'm just going to have to, you know, you just kind of go with that look right there. And see, I mean, the images that are real tiny dots and very tonal as opposed to solid, they stamp just fine like that, because, you know, a tiny little dot, you can't even see it if there is some variation within, you know, a tiny dot that's on the design. But when you're talking about a big solid one, you know, that kind of dynamic starts to happen in terms of the impression properties. But okay, there you have it, I think. I don't want to add anything into this. I think I just like it like this. I'm talking about focal point, you know, in terms of like a bird or something like that. It would be pretty dynamic, though, if I put one in there, but I think I just want to leave it like this. Yeah. So anyways, I'll do my little final comment on this. See, it's all kind of wet in there, so things don't look kind of unified and whatnot from a textural standpoint. So I really like this area up here where it has that really nice satin sheen to it, and all the imagery just kind of takes on a little bit more of a cohesive type of feel. So I'll let this set up for a little bit, and we'll come back and take a look and see what we have. Okay. All right, I've allowed this to dry for about 20 minutes, and it's not completely dry in terms of a couple of the impressions, but it's close enough. I think everything's kind of dried sufficiently enough to somewhat kind of mellow out and to really get this kind of nice, kind of even sheen from a textural standpoint to develop within this piece. So anyways, kind of a long journey here, of course, and if you've sat through this video, I certainly appreciate it and am rather amazed that you've done so. I'll be certainly doing a, I don't know, it's probably a 1,000 speed time-lapse of this. But let's take a look at this up close here. We can see the different transitions here. It has a nice sheen to it. That's what kind of surprises me about this matte paper. When you apply all these inks on there, it kind of, the inks themselves become kind of the texture of the surface. You know, the paper has something to do with it too, but I don't know, I really like this kind of just real nice kind of satin finish to this piece. We can see the variations in the leaves up here. I think I just stamped those one color, but where it overlapped into a kind of a heavier application of ink, I think it stamped out lighter. I don't recall if I changed the, you know, some of that, the colors within that piece. And look at this, you know, sometimes the black stamps really dark, and sometimes it's kind of a little bit lighter. So there's a little bit of unpredictability that goes along with this process. But, okay, these are some of the ones that are just a touch wet still. You can still see it on the edges of those leaves, but it should take on kind of more of the spirit of something like this. It's a little bit wet there on the branches right there, but I really like that kind of passage right in there. Some reads that there, but what it looks like kind of at arm's distance is something like this. I'm trying to get it without that glare on there. But anyways, a really fun piece, and as I just did that little kind of tour, I don't know if you saw any of the the sub impressions that we have removed. I don't think they're obtrusive at all in here. If I really look close, you can see some of those reeds kind of ghosted within these forms, but I don't think an obtrusive thing at all. If someone didn't know they were down there, like I can see some kind of shadow figures in here, but I don't know if that's really a bad thing in that space right there. It looks just, you know, kind of plain, but upon further inspection it just looks like more kind of foliage back there. But throughout this space in here, you know, pretty much we buried all of that, all those forms that we didn't want anymore. So I don't know. This was quite a journey. I wouldn't want to do that again, you know, in terms of the eradication of so much, you know, so many previous impressions. But it's interesting to me that it worked, and it worked so well. I didn't want to get rid of all that work that I did in here in terms of that, you know, that base layer. But I don't know, it just comes to show you, you know, with some media out here. I don't know if that's the case with all hybrid inks and kind of the potential removal of unwanted or second-guessed types of impressions, if they can come out like that all the time. But they did on this piece, and I don't know, what a revelation. So, one of my few 11 by 17s here, and it was certainly fun in areas, and other areas not so fun, but definitely a learning experience, and kind of a process that was quite enjoyable to undergo, or a journey, I should say. And that's kind of a pretty decent description for this piece right here. So thanks for watching. If you're subscribed to the channel, thanks so much for subscribing. And as always, thanks for checking out this video.